You were saying earlier about you were really into comedians when you were younger. What comedians did influence you? Who had a big effect on you?
Well, the comics that I really like were originally people like Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, so that's had no influence on my stand-up. And then I like people like Frankie Howerd a great deal, again, which has no real... I suppose the only thing is that I do every now and again kind of, mutter and get vaguely confused, but in a non-scripted form. It was probably people like, as unfashionable as this is, at the time, people like Ben Elton, and Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson, and all the anarchy that they had in what they did, and this fantastic slapstick, and just the comics that I saw down in clubs. So I'm sure if I saw their material now, much like when I saw Ben Elton's material from the mid-80s, I thought, how did I ever believe he really thought these things? Because looking at it now, I don't think he does. I think Alexei Sayle actually was probably one of the biggest influences as well. Alexei Sayle I started watching about the age of 12 or 13, probably came on television, and I thought he was phenomenal. And I think a lot of people don't know how influential he has been on the modern comedy circuit. So yeah, Alexei Sayle would have been one, and Jeremy Hardy, Mark Steele, Mark Thomas. I was watching all those people when I was a teenager. And now I work with them, which is brilliant. That's one of the weird things. That's when you have to, because there are so many down points, you will find yourself in a shitty little town and you will have done your gig and you weren't happy with your gig. And there were things, some of it was your fault, some of it you think was maybe their fault because they were in blue afro wigs and they smelled some stinking new liqueur that was being promoted by some women in miniskirts outside. And there was a vague kind of sense of vomit and fear about the whole thing. And then you have these other moments where you really, when you go and play music festivals, you get paid to do music festivals and then wander around afterwards and see everything for free, and things like that, working with Barry Cryer, going on Radio 4 shows that you listened to when you were 16 years old, all of that. And you always have to... I did a show called Loose Ends with John Hegley, who's a brilliant, I don't know if you know him, but a brilliant comedy poet, and he's been around for probably 25 years. And Martha Reeve, who used to be in a great Motown band called Martha Reeve and the Vandellas, she was on it as well, and he made her do a kind of duet, do the chorus of his comedy song about his French grandmother. And afterwards we were in the pub and he was going, I can't believe it, I had Martha Reeve, who is one of the legends of 1960s Motown, being my backing singer. And you have these little moments every now and again.
Yeah. Are there any comedians now that are influencing you? Are there any people that you see that are up and coming that have particularly grabbed your attention at the moment?
I think the comedy circuit, I don't know if anyone's... It's hard to say people have grabbed my attention because a lot of the people that I work with on such a regular basis. I don't work with a huge variety of comedians. Obviously, when I'm touring, it's just me and a band, Phil Jay's band. But there are people that I work with a lot. Josie Long is someone that I've worked with since she was 16 years old, and we do a lot of gigs together. And Mark Thomas quite often do weird gigs, benefit gigs, and strange gigs that I, put on. So there's no one... There are people that I really admire and respect, but we kind of hang around together, so you wouldn't really... It doesn't feel like you're looking up to them. You just kind of look across them and think, fuck, I've got to be as good as them. There are certain comics that I watch and I just think they're so much better. They are so good at what they do, and it makes you work harder but also feel vaguely sad that you don't think you can get to that level. But then again, whatever you do yourself, you obviously always find reasonably simple, and therefore that means that you can only belittle it and think, well, anyone can do this. And so, yeah, there are a lot of people. I did these Christmas gigs called 9 Lessons and Carols for Godless People, which they were great fun of kind of mixing science, which is something that I'm trying to do more now, is get scientists in an entertainment environment mixed with comedians, mixed with musicians. And we had Jarvis Cocker was on, and we had Mark Thomas and Stuart Lee and Chris Addison and Josie Long and all of these people, and it was a great mixture of people, and that they actually inspire me a lot. When Richard Dawkins did them, and Simon Singh the physicist, and Ben Goldacre who writes Bad Science for The Guardian, that kind of influences me because I watch scientists and the passion that they have to say to the world, look, you're being bamboozled by a load of charlatans. You really, try and learn this. Try and, if knowing science is great. So in fact, I'm probably being more inspired at the moment by people like, two people who are actually dead now, Richard Feynman, who was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Carl Sagan, who was an astronomer and popularizer of science. And they've been a huge influence over the last 4 years. Every time that I watch them or read their books, I think, right, how can I turn an anecdote about a 16th century astronomer into a bit of stand-up? How can I somehow make a joke involving this idea in physics when I don't even understand the idea? And there is this kind of schism now on the circuit where there are quite a few stand-ups who, there's what I would call the mainstream circuit now, which is probably covered by things like Jongleurs, which is really a mainstream club, and that's fine. I think that's good. That's made for block bookings and people who they know they're going to have a dance afterwards, all that kind of stuff. And then there's this little kind of, ghetto, kind of underground, what might be called, as crass it sounds, the indie scene of comedy, where we're trying to do things which are just, a little bit more stupid and passionate, and the danger as well, something that I was talking about the other day, is that most of the comics I know, when they go up on stage, they are themselves. They're not an ironic take on things. If someone afterwards comes up to them and says, why did you do that joke? They can just go, joke's just ironic or whatever. They are what they say on stage is what they believe. And there's more people coming up like that again as well, which I think is fantastic. It's a really rambly answer.
It's fine. You mentioned Josie Long. Are you planning to tour the book club again? I've not been able to do it, so.
The book club is not going to tour again, but it will do music festivals. So we do Latitude every year. Well, Glastonbury just asked me actually if I want to do the Words and Pictures, or whatever it's called, Words and Motion or something, I don't know, tent again, which I'll probably do, and then I'll do the comedy tent there as well, which is fantastic. That was, the music festivals, that's a great thing. That's when you realise that, when you, like TV and a lot of the media stuff, they're always going, oh, everyone's an idiot nowadays, our demographic won't understand this. And when I played Leeds, the promoter said I'd dumb down for Reading, and I played Reading, and in fact I could do 40 minutes which included stuff about the human genome and Charles Darwin to 3,000 drunk students, and they got it and they were into it, and it was really one of my favourite gigs. In Glastonbury as well, you get the chance to play to people who kind of have slightly leftish thinking, and I think out there, that's one of the great things about stand-up, is TV will constantly rein you in. And I've done TV stand-up shows where people rang me up and said, oh, I saw it. And I went, oh, what do you think about that routine? And they went, that wasn't in there. And I think, but that was the main routine. And find out they've chopped out the bit that I really wanted to do on TV and just kept the kind of extraneous ideas. Whereas live stand-up means you can go out there and the only person, ultimately, who screws it up is you. The only person who creates a really bad gig.
Talking about more control, do you think you'll be releasing this show on Go Faster Stripe at all? Have you got plans to do that?
Yeah, I think it's very weird. There was someone, I didn't really read any reviews, but there was someone who reviewed the show and said that they found it quite weird because it feels very, it feels like it doesn't in any way represent what I'm like now. And to an extent, the show that I did for Go Faster Stripe is the transitional show before I've moved on to something else. And it took me a year to actually be nailed down to edit it, because I hate watching myself. So they kept saying, we need to edit it. And I went, and now when I actually sat down, I went, oh man, this stuff's so old, because I'd written 2 shows since then. So this show, I hope that we'll probably film sometime at the beginning of the summer, and also maybe film stuff at festivals and things and throw in some weird extras. Yeah. But I like this show now, but by April, I'll hate it.
Yeah.
As much as I try and change it, I also have to think, I can't change it too much, because if I put a whole new hour and a half of material in at the end of the show, well, that's really my next show. But I've kind of accidentally toured it, so you have to be quite careful in that way.
A final question, just a question for me really. I took a year off before I came to university and became obsessed with Richard and Judy, ridiculously obsessed with Richard and Judy. And I used to love it when you used to pop up and Richard Herring would pop up and then get various comedians on. But I'm a big fan of Richard Madeley, and I just wondered if you had any kind of top Richard and Judy moments from when you were on the show, and kind of classic.
I enjoyed talking about Newtonian physics when we were wondering why a man from an internet clip had slid down a slide, and whereas everyone else had gone into the pool, he had gone straight over the pool and landed on his arse. And we sat there talking about different notions of the force of gravity and resistance, and why this might have happened, while Judy was kind of, I don't know what they're talking about. And I actually really like Richard and Judy. I think that Richard is much smarter than people think, and he listens to loads of radio, he reads loads of books, and I know everyone always goes, oh, he's like Alan Partridge. He's actually not. He is very funny, and the great thing about doing shows like that, because I sometimes find it a weird mix, that I spend my days reading books by Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky and whatever, and then trying to do clever, actually they're never clever routines, they're always really stupid routines about US foreign policy or whatever. And then by day I do things on Richard and Judy. But I actually quite like to have these twin disciplines, if that's what they are, and be able to get away with references to whatever happened to Baby Jane and, African orchid beetles on Richard and Judy. And as long as they're happy, you can keep going on it.
I've missed them since they've gone to watch. I don't get watch, so.
No, a lot of people don't know where they are anymore, which is a great pity. There's an advert for them on the bus shelter near where I live, but the bin's too big and it blocks out the channel it's on. It's that kind of marketing that just doesn't work.
Well,
That was very long, wasn't it? The book club won't tour again, but it's going to go at music festivals. If you're a young comedian, then the best thing to do is try and be yourself as much as possible and don't care too much about audience reactions. I started in 1992, things went up and down for quite a while, now I really like it. That's approximately the interview in 30 seconds. That's what you should have got rather than half an hour.
You were saying earlier about you were really into comedians when you were younger. What comedians did influence you? Who had a big effect on you?
Well, the comics that I really like were originally people like Lauren Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, so that's had no influence on my stand-up. And then I like people like Frankie Howerd a great deal, again, which has no real, I suppose the only thing is that vision, and I thought he was phenomenal, and I think a lot of people don't know how influential he has been on the modern comedy circuit. So yeah, Lexi Sale would have been one, and Jeremy Hardy, Mark Steele, Mark Thomas. I was watching all those people when I was a teenager. And now I work with them, which is brilliant. That's one of the weird... And just the comics that I saw down in clubs, so I'm sure if I saw their material now, much like when I saw Ben Elton's material from the mid-'80s, I thought, how did I ever believe he really thought these things? Because looking at it now, I don't think he does. I think Alexi Sale actually was probably one of the biggest influences as well. Alexi Sale I started watching about the age of 13, 12 or 13, probably came on television. I do every now and again kind of, mutter and get vaguely confused, but in a non-scripted form. It was probably people like, as unfashionable as this is, at the time, people like Ben Elton, and Rick Mell and Ade Edmondson and all the anarchy that they had in what they did, and this fantastic slapstick things. That's when you have to, because there are so many down points, you will find yourself in a shitty little town and you'll have done your gig and you weren't happy with your gig, and there were things, some of it was your fault, some of it you think was maybe their fault because they were in blue afro wigs and they smelled some stinking new liqueur that was being promoted by some women in miniskirts outside.